Hey, it's Sila Social Studies.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Sheila's Social Studies. Alright, so this is called From Neutrality to War. So here we're discussing the United States and its involvement in World War I. So this great war was quickly spreading its way across Europe. Okay, this is an important piece of information when we discuss the reasons why the United States was not willing to enter the war right away. The war was not fought on American soil, nor were Americans in immediate danger. So did it make sense for the United States to send millions of troops off to another continent to die? However, here are three pretty good reasons why America was able to stay out of this war for so long. First reason, we're going to go with what you have here. Yes, the first bullet point. The United States is a nation full of immigrants. That's the first thing. It's true that this nation had ties with Britain based upon our history, our language, our trade, but it was still difficult for the United States to pick a side. Remember that even though the British settled here in America first, don't forget we had that huge round of immigration between 1840 and 1860, where nearly 2 million Germans and even some Austrian-Hungarians immigrated into America, leaving our president in a predicament that does he choose Britain and the Allied powers, or does he choose Germany and the Central powers? And the answer up front for him was easy: don't join either side. Secondly, the reason is that the United States didn't want to join this war because it was a stalemate. And a stalemate is when there's no clear winner of the war so far. If the United States was able to see the momentum swinging one way or the other, they may have joined on that side, which would effectively guarantee that quicker victory for the winning side. However, because nobody was winning, they were stuck in these trenches for years upon years, gaining a little bit of ground each time. It was just a stalemate. There was no clear victor. So we didn't enter the war for that reason either. And the final reason that the United States didn't join the war at the beginning was the trade problem. So nearing the beginning of the war, France and Britain struggled against Germany, and the United States felt it should continue to trade with every one of those nations. And if the United States wanted to stay neutral, if they wanted to stay a neutral nation, it would have to place it would not be able to place an embargo or a trade restriction on one country or the other and still trade with its adversary. That couldn't happen. That would make the United States lose its neutral status, showing that it was favoring one nation or another over its trade. So some economists believed that the United States stopped trading with Europe, our economy would crumble. So they're trying to keep the trade with all three nations. If they were to choose trading with Germany, then they would be seen as an enemy of Britain. If they choose Britain, they're an enemy of Germany. So as the war progressed, the United States began to trade more with the Allied forces. American cargo ships would carry supplies and war materials to Britain and France. And as American trade increased with Britain, the British Navy set out to effectively stop German maritime trade. The largest navy in the world set up a blockade around German trade ports, and Britain succeeded in shutting down the German supply chain. And this blockade had a larger effect on the war than predicted. And in 1850, a German engineer named Wilhelm Bauer invented a new type of ocean vessel that Germany would continue to perfect and would revolutionize naval warfare as we know it. Bauer invented the submarine, which in German is called the Unterseeboot and abbreviated to the U-boat. The U-boat was the only way that Germany felt that it could outmaneuver the British blockade, and it worked. Germany used the U-boats to escape through British blockades and attacked Allied battleships and supply lines, only to slip away undetected because they were underwater. It was these U-boat attacks that helped many Americans who were on the fence debating if they should support the Central or the Allied powers, with the majority choosing the Allied powers because of these German U-boat attacks. As Germany attempted to compromise with Britain and said that underwater naval warfare would stop if Britain would lift its blockade, and America wasn't at war with them, the United States and Germany struck a deal. And when Germany agreed not to sink any more American supply ships, as long as the U.S. said it wasn't supporting Britain, then they can continue on. Okay? The problem here, Germany doesn't keep its promise when it continued to sink American supply ships. And Germany believed that the United States was supplying the Allied powers with weapons. And unfortunately, unfortunately, however you look at it, they were correct. So in comes this story here. So Americans didn't care much about the British blockade and undersea German warfare as long as Germany would keep its promise not to sink American ships. And we just learned that they didn't keep that promise. And now I'm going to tell you about like the passenger ship that changed everything. So passenger travel from America to Europe was not unfamiliar to anyone. Remember that millions of European immigrants still had family in Europe, and as a precautionary measure, Germany took out advertising space in American newspapers and put the nation on alert. If you traveled on ships from America to Europe and it carried war supplies, it would risk submarine attack. So enter the story of the British passenger ship, the Lusitania. On May 7, 1915, the British passenger liner, the Lusitania, was making a return trip from New York to Liverpool, England. And British command instructed the captain of that ship to take evasive action on the return by zigzagging or sailing around known German U-boat zones. The captain did not heed this warning, and around 2 p.m. the ship was struck by a torpedo and sank off the South Irish coast. On board the Lusitania was nearly 1,200 passengers, with 128 of them being American citizens. The British captain ignored the warning, and the Germans killed innocent Americans. This infuriated the American public, and pressure started to grow on President Wilson for America to join the war on the side of the Allied powers. The world began to look negatively upon Germany, and the American government warned Americans of the risk of overseas travel from then on out. So for the next 2 years, President Wilson and his staff argued about the course of action to take with Germany and deals that were promised and broken numerous times. So did the Germans have a right to sink the Lusitania? Well, when it passed itself off as a passenger liner, no. But it was carrying over 173 tons of munitions, which are weapons and ammunition, from the United States to Britain. So that's your call. So there are several other factors that helped lead the American involvement into the war. Germany was practicing unrestricted submarine warfare, and in March of 1916, Germany torpedoed the French passenger ship the Sussex, killing many and wounding 2 Americans. Wilson threatened to sever relationships with Germany when in May of the same year, Germany issued the Sussex Pledge, where they promised to give adequate warning before firing on merchant and passenger ships and attending to the safety of the passengers. However, if it was a naval vessel, it would be torpedoed without warning. That lasted until February of 1917, when Germany felt that the United States had shown trade preferences to the Allied powers and announced that because of this, they will be returning to a policy of unrestricted submarine warfare, resulting in the torpedoing of any vessel located in the war zone area without warning. And because of this action, Wilson severed relationships with the German government. Now, near the beginning of 1917, the United States and Mexico's relationship was strained. Pancho Villa had entered the United States and raided many southern villages, causing damage and fear, trying to provoke tensions between the two countries. Wilson sent armed troops to Mexico to find and eliminate Villa, and Germany took note of this and tried to exploit that strained relationship between the U.S. and Mexico. At the beginning of the war, British had severed telegraph lines between Germany and the United States, so any telegram needed to be sent from Germany had to be sent through a neutral nation to be received across the Atlantic Ocean. And in January 1917, Arthur Zimmerman, Germany's Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, dispatched a telegram to Mexico regarding a deal that traveled through the U.S. Embassy in Berlin. This would become known as the famous Zimmerman telegram, or the Zimmerman Note. Zimmerman sent the telegram to Mexico through the American embassy, and the British intelligence intercepted this telegram, decoded it, and sent it to President Wilson on February 24, 1917. That note stated that if the United States entered the war against Germany, Mexico would promise to declare war on the United States, and in return, Zimmerman promised Mexico the return of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, which were parts of the Mexican cession that it had lost after the Mexican-American War. And in March, the United States published a telegram in newspapers across the country gaining support from the American people to enter the war. There was a small fraction of American-German descent who would oppose the war, but after more German U-boat attacks, President Wilson would use this Zimmerman Note as ammunition and to ask Congress to declare war. And finally, on April 2nd, 1917, President Wilson addressed Congress with many grievances against the German government, and on April 6, 1917, Congress voted, and the United States declared war on Germany with only 2 senators opposing the war effort.